Okay, welcome everybody to this presentation, which has been a long time in the works. I actually meant to present this presentation on tools versus toys last year, and then for different reasons couldn't get around to doing it. And we're supposed to do it in November, and then with the strikes, now we are in January doing it. Better late than never. It's been a very popular theme. I've been getting tons and tons of questions around different materials and pushback sometimes that we get from colleagues that feel that students are playing and not and should not be playing at school and so forth. And so we're going to be walking through these different items. So I'm Catherine Korah. I am the coordinator of the Center of Excellence for Behavior Management. My third year now that I'm in this role. I before then, Eva DeGostini was running the center. And I'm really, really lucky to have now Zarina, who's joined the center. Zarina, I'll let you present yourself.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Zarina Fernandes, and I work with Catherine at the Center of Excellence, but I also work as a behavior technician for the Riverside School Board. And I have been collaborating with the center for a couple of years now to implement and fine-tune the use of a nurturing support center in an elementary school.
And the piece that I really love is given her experience, Zarina's experience, and mine that is actually quite different, it really becomes really complementary. And so I'm quite excited for you guys to be here today and to hear this material through both our lenses. So I will share screen. And all right, I'm just going to, oh, it's already in that mode. Wonderful. And so tools versus toys. And so same items that can be both a tool and a toy. And what is the difference between the same item being one or the other? And so we've just, oh, I forgot to, I'm just going to put, before I forget, I'm going to put in the chat the documents because we have the handout. I'm going to put that right now into the chat. So we've got the handout, and Zarina and I put together a resource document with more information. So I'm going to put that into the chat as well. Here we go. So hopefully people have access to it right now and are able to download that. I will be later on in the presentation putting it up again because anytime there's a new person that comes in, they only have access to what's downloaded once they're in the room. So I'll make sure later to put it into the chat. Know that I will be emailing you those documents as well with the recording. And so it really is important to make a distinction between tools and toys because both for the student and the staff, because if the student thinks that in that moment it is a respite. I mean, it's okay to have moments of respite, but if they are playing, that it's a time to have fun and to use the item as a toy, the experience will be very different than if we really structure it and for them to understand what is the purpose of that item, why are we using that item, what is the benefit, what's the objective in using that item, and so forth. And so it changes everything in the way that we introduce the tool to the student. Same thing with our colleagues. And so how often, I've when I come to visit schools and I observe a staff working with students, especially support staff, and they are using certain tools, and from the outside, the view from the outside, when somebody walks by, it may look like as if the student is playing or that they're using toys in order to play. And actually, it's quite the opposite, that the support staff that is there working with the student actually had a very concrete objective in mind and are working on something with the use of that item that is used as a tool. And there's a whole kind of structure that goes along with it. But because the colleague is not aware of that and doesn't understand what it is that you're doing, oftentimes there will be pushback from those colleagues. Either the teacher, for example, who doesn't want to send the student out of the classroom for respite because let's say they've misbehaved and right now in that moment they don't deserve to play, then it makes it very difficult for the adult to be on board if they don't understand what it is that we're doing. But if there is something that is very clear and concrete and that we explain to our colleagues, no, that this isn't a toy, it's not playtime, there's a purpose to this, we are using this item in a structured fashion with a specific objective, it makes it very different. And so it will help our colleagues be more on board. And so basically, if we look at it in definition, the difference between a tool and a toy is that a tool is an item that is used to help meet a specific need or to help effect a change, whereas a toy is more there for a pleasure or for entertainment. And both require that both, whether it's a tool or a toy, even if it's the same item, they do need to be handled with care, of course, if we want there to be longer lifespan to this item. Now, as I mentioned, the same item can be used both as a tool or a toy, depending on the objective at hand. And so when we are more clear and explicit about that item, it makes all the difference. Zarina, I'd be curious for you to share with the group, observations or experiences that you've had in your role about, using some of these items and being able to clarify, the way that you're using it and so forth, and how that's kind of affect change.
Definitely it's hard when you're first introducing something new to a student and to the teacher as well, because a lot of these tools are distracting if they're not used the right way. And so there's a whole process that has to be done properly in order to get the buy-in from everybody, if you will, to make sure that it's actually seen and used as a tool.
Thanks, Zarina. And so, Zarina and I took a lot of time as we were working through this presentation to look through different pieces of literature in terms of research, seeing what is out there that is promoting and supporting the use of different tools and the benefits of them. And so we did find some pieces of literature. I have to admit, there aren't tons and tons out there. There could be so much more. Probably most of it is more qualitative than quantitative. Some of the kind of areas of research that is the most popular right now would be both for brain breaks and for the use of fidgets. And so in terms of the brain breaks, and I actually have right now, as we speak, a francophone centre de service scolaire that are working onto a piece of research that's going to be in French, but I would love to get my hands on it once it's done and to be able to translate that and to be able to offer it to you. And they're really walking through, the different elements behind the brain breaks. What is the purpose of a brain break? What is the benefits? And so these are just pictures highlighting, for example, that when on average, a student is exposed to regular brain breaks, not only does it help in terms of the behavior in the class or their attendance to school and class, in terms of developing their cognition, in terms of their grades, that their grades improve, and their performance is so much better, that the physical movement that we allow is so much different. And so you've got a picture here on the left-hand side of a brain that has been sitting quietly for a certain time, and you see the activation there in the brain that is actually quite minimal. And so think about, when that student is sitting there at the desk, chair and desk, and that they're trying to focus on the lesson at hand, and that they're immobile, that there isn't as much activation happening in the brain. And so we can wonder that perhaps the student isn't as attentive or curious and so forth. And so on the right-hand side, you've got a brain after just 20 minutes of walk. In comparison to the brain, the picture on the left here, you see that there is so much more activation there in the brain. And we're not talking about doing high level energy activities. We're talking about walking. And so think about, if we were to set up in our classrooms pockets of time and space where, and I'm saying classroom, but it can even be in the hallway. It can be if you've got a space in your school where a support staff are there, to be able to get kids to move, to be able to be active. We're also going to be talking about flexible seating. And so if a student is standing up to do an activity rather than sitting at a desk and chair, oh my goodness, the difference that can make. And so we see here in terms of scores in math and reading, in terms of lesser discipline referrals and better attendance, we really see statistically the difference in just having a regular class without investing into brain breaks and flexible seating compared to if we do indeed put that in place. And so this was one piece of research that we had found, and I do have some links that I will send you if you want to look more into that piece of research. I've got a whole sheet with different links of research based on brain breaks. Zarina?
Yeah, so research on fidgets. It's important to note that there has been research done on fidgets. Why? Because we need to understand that fidgeting is not a fad, and it's not just going to disappear. And it didn't start with the craze of those very popular fidget spinners. Psychology research about sensation seeking tells us that people often seek to adjust their experience and their environment so that they provide just the right level of stimulation. And yes, toys do provide entertainment and they take away focus. However, when fidgets are used as tools, they have many, many benefits. And as stated here in the slide, toy-based pedagogy is based on the principle that toys are not just for entertainment or recreation, but also can be used as a learning resource for mental, physical, social, and emotional development of the child. Toys can open up and ignite the mind of a child.
Wonderful.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Fidgets and adults. We often forget that adults fidget too. It's usually very subtle and we don't realize we are fidgeting, but we are. Fidgeting in adults is often interpreted as a nervous habit, particularly for those with anxiety disorder. People with anxiety often feel a constant need to be on the move, which can create challenges in the workplace. And fidget toys are self-regulation tools, which can help the individual exercise the impulse for motion without negatively affecting the attention and the focus. And there's some examples here on the slide. We can pass a pen through our fingers back and forth. During long meetings, you might start doodling on your paper. A common one that I do myself is when I'm seated, I cross my legs and I gently shake my leg. Sometimes it's quiet tapping of the hands or the feet, or twirling your hair can be very soothing for both males and females.
Wonderful.
Those are just some examples.
Some examples. Yeah. And some adults tend to be more subtle in the way that they will fidget, and others are not as subtle. And so sometimes having an item can help bring the fidgeting that might be more natural in what we're doing with the body, that might be more distracting, to kind of recenter it and bring it to something that's more subtle. All right. So in terms of play, because that's the other piece as well, in terms of the research, the importance of, because we are distinguishing between tools and toys, but at the same time, I don't want to minimize the importance and benefit of play. And there's different types of play, and some play do allow for development and so forth. And so in terms of literature that's out there that I thought was so relevant, and I really wanted to bring this forward to you, is what has been the impact of the loss of play. We know that a lot of our students have less and less opportunities to play, or that the type of play that they're doing are not the kinds of play that are really beneficial. And so, for example, being on a screen, playing video games, or competitive sport, although it's helpful to be able to move, that there are other types of play, like imaginary play, for example, that has a whole other level of benefit. And so David Elkind, who's the author who wrote Power of Play, has said that over the past 2 decades, children have lost over 12 hours of free time a week, including 8 hours of unstructured play and outdoor activities. Free unstructured play, spontaneous pickup games, and self-initiated dramatic play are replaced now by digital devices. And so when they are in front of that screen, they're really not getting the type of play that they need. And so the fact that they have lost all of these opportunities actually has had an impact in terms of mental health and growth. So Stuart Brown, who's another author who's written Status of Play, has said that outdoor play has decreased by 71%, both in the US and the UK. We don't have the statistics for Canada, but I'm pretty much convinced that they're more or less the same. And so not only are they more on devices, and they're not getting the true play, they're also not outside as much. And that also has an impact in terms of mental health. Peter Gray And I forget now what's the name of his book, but in the American Journal of Play back in 2011, he made the correlation between the escalating diagnoses of anxiety, depression, and ADHD that are paralleled alongside with the loss of play. I know for a fact, this is a whole other separate statistic. I was just thinking about it right now. But there was research that was done when the Apple phone first came out, the iPhone. They were actually able to show that the appearance of the iPhone and how more and more people purchase the device, that there was a direct correlation with the augmentation of purchasing the device versus the increase as well of mental health issues, not just in children, but in adults too. And so it really has an impact on all of us. In terms of play, so I keep on using the word true play. And I really wanted to take the time to reiterate what is the difference between playing a video game or playing a board game versus more of that imaginary type of play. So there's three kind of categories or areas that distinguish different types of play from true play. And so what is needed here for play to be considered true play are the following. First of all, that it is an engaging activity. So it doesn't mean that the activity is necessarily fun. Sometimes it can be fun, but sometimes it can be, I don't know, if we're playing that we're scared or we're running away from a monster, it's quite engaging. It could be fun, but for some kids, it's actually quite frightening, but it is engaging. And so the need for an activity to engage, we're not passive in front of that situation, like a screen, for example. The other piece is what is the degree in which the student is engaged in that? Is it because they want to be engaged in it or because they are asked to be engaged in it? And so their degree of freedom, why are they doing this activity? Is it because they want to and they're motivated? So it's an intrinsic motivation, or is this something that they feel that is imposed onto them? And that will change the whole kind of essence of play, because for it to be true play, it really needs to come from inside out. And in terms of the sense of safety, is when the child doing that activity, are they in a place where they are just in their imagination, although it might be scary, but they know that it's not for real, so it's not, it's imaginary. They're feeling safe in that environment. And those are the three things. And then coming alongside with those three things, so they know for the fact that it's not for real, there's not true repercussions. If they decide to play doctor and that they hurt the patient, they know they're not going to get into trouble because it's not for real. And I mentioned before about freedom. And so alongside with that comes the objective. And so are we doing it for the pure pleasure of it? Are we doing it because we are trying to please somebody, or that there's a specific outcome or a specific result or objective? And so that would be considered work, not play. And then, of course, if it's coming from inside out and we're not passive in front and we're quite engaged in that situation, then the activity is really quite expressive. And so all of that together is what we would qualify true play. So, of course, we're going to walk through these different items and kind of talking about the benefits, and not all of them necessarily bring to play in terms of true play, but some of them do. You'll notice in the further categories that we're going to walk through that there is a piece there that is in terms of benefiting true play. So as it says here, true play does not involve work. It's not focused on outcome. It is not for task mastery or for learning. It is for the pure pleasure of it. True play allows the child to project what is from within. It's providing opportunities for emotional expression to happen without repercussions. And so if we're play fighting, I mean, as long as somebody doesn't get hurt, there aren't true repercussions because we're playing at that. And one of the most important functions of play serves in the development of the child's emotional system, preserving their well-being. And so going back to the loss of play, the slide on the loss of play, where Peter Gray says that there's a direct parallel between the loss of play and the escalating anxiety, depression, and ADHD, that we know that in play, there's a component of emotion that is allowing itself to express. For those that may have followed other presentations that I've done in the past, I have done some on emotions and how to be able to accompany emotions. If you haven't seen those presentations before, I invite you to go and take a look at them. And so I do talk at length in those presentations about how we can help students express those emotions, because those are needed for good functioning and well-being. And so talking about play and emotional well-being, and I did mention that some activities tend to be more expressive in the sense of our emotions. One example that's here with the picture that you see right now on the slide is from Hannah Beach. For those who don't know who Hannah Beach is, she wrote a book called Reclaiming Our Students. And along with the book, she has a kind of like a handbook where she lists different activities, expressive activities, and we will talk about it later in this presentation, emotional release activities. Some of them are through art or through drawing, through music, through movement. And so this picture here is from her editorial where she talks about the frustration monster. And so I invite you to go and take a look. If you Google Hannah Beach or Reclaiming Our Students, you will find her website, and she's got an article called The Frustration Monster. And so just kind of tying it into some of the literature, Stephen Porges and colleagues have mentioned that play allows for defenses to work themselves through. And so we know now that in the nervous system, it's the exact same same route in the system that both service play and that surface the defenses responses to mortal threat and the excitement to play. And so we know that when the child is playing, let's say they're playing Slay the Dragon, and they're really afraid of the dragon, and they're trying to, fight and win, that all of the pathways in the brain are similar in the play mode that they are in the real life. And so play becomes kind of the practice ground for individuals to walk through their different emotions and to recognize that, yes, it might have been really scary to fight that dragon, but oh my goodness, at the end of it, I won and I survived it. And so this can bring a sense of strength, a sense of confidence that we're able to face our fears and so forth. And so play allows to face these different emotional experiences. When children are stirred up by their emotions, oftentimes in their play will be the themes that they are stirred up by will be reflected in their play. And so to allow to give pockets of time and space and to give access to materials where students can kind of reenact some of these hardships that they're going through in their daily life in the play mode can make such a big difference. So play is how children naturally make sense of how the experience of their emotions. So in play, whether it's through a picture that they're drawing or they're making a structure or a game that they're engaged in, it allows for those emotions to come out in a safe way and for them to walk those through. So not only is play beneficial in terms of emotional health and well-being, but play is also very much needed for us to work on emotion regulation. Now, many of you have access to different social emotional learning programs where some of the objectives are around trying to focus on self-regulation. And so what I'm saying to you here is that rather than focusing on teaching these, thinking that it's a skill to teach, what I'm saying to you is from the developmental lens, it is not about teaching the skill. Sorry, I'm just going to take a gulp of water. For some kids, talking about emotion regulation isn't enough, or to model that and so forth. For some kids, what they need is actually to experience it through play. And as they are working on regulating their emotions in the play mode, this becomes the practice ground for them in real life. So according to Jack Panksepp, who is a theorist on play, he mentions that play facilitates the maturation of the prefrontal cortex. This is where you've got the executive functioning that allows for us to have impulse control. And so play allows for the maturation of that capacity. It's not something that is done in a rational way. It is done through experiencing in the play mode. where the child can reflect, look, and listen and feel before they act, and move onto their urges. And so this can be practiced in the play mode. The other benefit of play, especially rough and tumble play, is that it has an impact through the prefrontal cortex on planning and self-regulation capacity. Because when we are doing rough and tumble play, and that there's structure around that, we get to experience how much intensity we can put in, and where is that limit, where is that boundary. And so as we're practicing, especially like I'm saying in the rough tumble play, it allows for us to practice the stop and the go. There are other games that help that. For those that know, I think it's called red light, green light, or even Simon Says. And these are all of these different activities where we allow kids through that game to be able to learn on starting and stopping. And so it helps to practice those capacities for impulse control. So research has shown that self-regulation will better in those children who are allowed play without interruption. There has been research that has backed that up. In terms of the benefits of play in learning, because play not only helps with emotional well-being and self-regulation, it also helps in terms of the capacity to learn. Play provides ideal situations for the child to develop the ability for sustained engagement in that activity by staying selectively focused on the situation at the present time, tuning out distractions and holding the information in our heads. So for example, if you were to play a board game or a card game, that this allows for the child or the adolescent to practice sustaining that engagement and that focus and working on the memory. And so a lot of these different tools can help in terms of building the fundamental skills that we need that helps us to learn better. We can observe the effects of an active engagement on executive functioning skills. A study compared children that from the Montessori to the non-Montessori schools, and they discovered that the kids who did go to a Montessori school and had the opportunity to play without interruption, and that their play was self-directed, that they performed much better at executive functioning tasks than the other groups that didn't have that access to play without interruptions as much. And so there really are, statistics research that has shown the difference between these two categories. Zarina?
Other benefits of play. So many games support interactive play and social skills. So children learn through games and play how to take turns, how to compromise, how to share, how to collaborate. And all the while they're developing their language and communication skills. And of course, they're having fun. So tools for this play can be fidgets. It can be building activities. It can be creating activities. It can be various types of games. And this playtime also gives the students the opportunity to switch gears and process their emotions. The importance of introducing, trying, and setting expectations. I have to say that these are the three important aspects for smooth sailing. So we cannot expect students to know what to do and what not to do with the tool. So we have to give them very clear instructions and even explain what not to do with a specific tool. So there needs to be structure, procedures to access specific tools. They need to be introduced. So the tools need to be explained, modeled, and obviously, safety is always the top consideration. They need to be requested by the student or offered by the adult, because if there's taking and grabbing whenever they want, then the tool is going to be seen as a toy that they have access to all the time. So that's important. Also acknowledge the proper use of the tools by providing feedback to the student after they have used them. All all the tools need to be handled with care in order to optimize their long duration. Making an agreement also with the student can be helpful prior to its use. So you would sit with the student and say that we're going to go through a trial period. We're going to try this tool out, see how it helps you, and obviously state the rules of how you would like it to be used. Also, having a visual in the classroom to remind the student of the rules is better than always having to verbally remind them, because like a public request often ends up being a power struggle very quickly.
Mm.
And remember that there has to be that trial period. So you need to evaluate, is this tool the right fit? And verify, is it answering the student's need or challenge? On the next slide, we have an example of expectation poster or activity. So here are some examples of the visual that I mentioned. So there's a poster with tool expectations on it. And one is an activity. So it can be done with the students or with the class. And you come up with the rules together, write them down. These are options again. Instead of reminding them verbally, you can simply just point to the poster.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to add, how often, because some of these school tools can be actually quite costly. And the time and money and investment that we put into having access to this material. And then, going back to your previous slide about, are we taking the time to introduce them and to model them? And, especially at the beginning of the year when you've got a new group and you're with them and we're going through the structures and routines of the class, that would be the perfect time to be able to include those different items within that. And it really does make a big difference. I mean, I have, and I'm sure you've witnessed it too, Zarina, but I know for me, when I'm visiting different classrooms or schools, even if it's not in a class, but it's, let's say, in an Oasis room, that the way that tools have been introduced and structured changes completely the degree in which a tool might be beneficial or not. And so how often I've come across, let's say a teacher, requests support from my center, and then they're struggling with a specific student or with a group. And, we go through different things that they've tried, and they're saying to me, I've tried everything, nothing works. And sometimes it's not that you haven't tried everything, but it's the thing in which you've tried. How have you tried it? And or if you've tried a certain tool that, let's say, and we'll talk about this later, but in terms of flexible seating, for example, so you've tried a stool, and for that specific student, the stool really wasn't a good fit for them. And so have we looked at, maybe the issue is not flexible seating in general, maybe the issue is the type of seat that we've selected for that student. And sometimes thinking, reflecting on those things, maybe we need to reiterate, even the quiet corner. How often I will have staff that will say to me, Catherine, the quiet corner is a problem in the classroom because it's more of a distraction than it is a help. And so to me, this is the opportunity for us to reflect, like, why is it that it's distracting? What is it in that corner that is causing distraction? Rather than saying, I'm going to get rid of the corner altogether, maybe we need to revisit what are the items that are placed within that corner and how that's been structured and introduced and modeled and so forth. So to me, like, if from this whole presentation, these are the two things that you guys take away from, like, we've done our job. Like, this to me is so important. All right.
To continue on that, I think it's very important to make a plan when trying out new tools.
Right.
And so step one would be to identify, what is the student's need? What is their profile? What is their specific challenge? Do they have sensory needs or preferences? And what is the objective of using this specific tool? Step two would be choosing the right conditions for the student to be successful. So what will the tool be used for? Is it safe? Is it the right size? Is it going to be distracting? Where and when will it be used? Does it need supervision? These are all the questions that we should be asking ourselves. Are the parents going to be informed? Does the student need to be accompanied by the support from OT? Step three would be putting the plan in place. making sure, this is often forgotten, making sure that all the adults involved are aware of the plan.
Right.
So yes, it does include the parents, and it includes the technicians and the attendants that work in the school, and the many teachers that may come in the classroom, because it's very, very difficult for the student when one adult tells them, yes, you can use this, and then the next adult tells them, no, you cannot use that. So very, very important. Make sure all the adults involved are aware what the plan is. And when you introduce something, you can model it. How do you expect this tool to be used? How is it most beneficial? So you really accompany the student with the tool so that it becomes a routine. Lastly would be to review the use of the tool, as I mentioned earlier, verify whether the tool is being used correctly, review whether a different tool altogether would be more helpful, and evaluate the way it's being used. Already at the next slide.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of moved ahead. I moved ahead of you, but
Okay.
by the way, those that are here watching, the what Zarina's talking about right now, and she's kind of have like these different steps. I don't have it on the slides here, but in the resource guide that you received, there's a table there in the resource guide with all of those steps written out, so you don't have to take additional notes. It's all there laid out for you.
Importance of having materials available. I've gone into many classrooms and the tools are not out, or they're just out of sight. So it seems like they're unavailable. And students will ask or go use things that are visible and easily accessible. Obviously, it's not good to have everything out and disorganized, but having things that are organized and visible is going to guarantee that they're going to be used. And we can help our students by teaching when it's an appropriate time to use a specific tool and which ones they need to ask permission to use. As a class, specific routines will create a community of responsibility to maintain order and to care for the tools. Some students benefit from using a personal choice board, which I'll explain in the next slide. And this helps them with structuring choice, because it can be too overwhelming when you have too many choices. Another great resource is a personal bin for selected students, and it has reserved items inside that are just for them. And I'll also go a little bit more in depth about this in the next slide.
Perfect.
So here we have an example of the personal choice board, as I mentioned. Basically, the board has a few pictures of choices on Velcro, and the student can select one option at a time. And this was created because we simply cannot assume that our students know what they need. So, you know, when you ask them, it ends up being no, no, no. Everything that you suggest is no. Everything that you ask is no. So without any verbal expression or any adult guidance, the student can use this personal choice board to select which tool will best help them in that specific moment. And the board provides them with clear boundaries on like what the options are to the student. And not having to ask the adult for permission will obviously increase the likelihood of them doing it. And these boards should be created prior with the student, and you can have them pick a few choices that they like, and you would store it in an area that's easily accessible to them.
I wanted to add, so on top of having, you know, the student feels like they have a voice in this, where you know, it's things that have been chosen along with them, it's things that they like and are interested in. So you increase their engagement and their buy-in. But also the items that were selected were also, you know, things that were tested out first, where we make sure that it's a good fit for that student. Because you know, if we put onto the board items that actually are more distracting than helpful, then you know, this is where we need to make sure that that step is there too. It's not just about putting a bunch of cards that they like onto the board, it's about trying them out first and making sure that they are a well-adapted fit and that they're answering to the objective that we have in mind.
And you can see that in the picture. Sorry, Catherine, if
Right.
you just go
Yeah.
back. In the first board, there's only a few options. And then after it increases to more, depending on your student, probably a younger student, you might only want to put 3 or 4 options.
Exactly.
This is an example of a personal bin. So it could be a bucket or a basket. It really doesn't matter. What's important is that it's only for that one student. So no sharing, and that it's available to them. So similarly to the choice board, it should be prepared with the student during a scheduled time. So not after a conflict or during a challenging time. It's best if it stays in the same designated location so that the student knows that it's there and they can go and get it. We can help the student place items in the bin that we have determined are beneficial to them, such as a book, such as fidgets, such as a personal, like in that image, there's a note from a mother. We can provide them obviously with some choices, ask them, would you like these items in there? Some things that they might like, and then that creates the ownership that this is just for them. And you would put a label on it with their name. And having access to this private access to their own tools, it gives the students a lot of comfort. Do you want to add something to that, Catherine?
Well, I was just going to say, that because you mentioned about keeping it in the same place as much as possible. I think about select few students that would benefit from it both into the classroom and into, let's say there's an Oasis room or a nurturing support center. Unless you were to create 2 of them for each space, it could be that the student will bring it back and forth, but only within those 2 spaces. And so we want to make sure the student doesn't bring it home, that it doesn't get lost, or that that it's moved around too much. But I would see for select few students that have a hard time staying in class all day, every day, and that are, going back and forth, that unless we've got 2 bins for them, one for the class and one for the other space, that they could technically bring it with them to the other spot.
For sure. What I meant was that, let's say it's in 2 locations, that it's always going back to the same spot so that they know where
predictable, it's consistent. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. A couple considerations to keep in mind. And some of this Zarina kind of mentioned already, but I'm trying to see I think the piece here that's the most important to me is the trial and error, that it's not a one size fits all. It's not because an item works for one student or for many students that it will work for this particular student. It really is about, trying them out. It's trial and error. And so as we see, and I mentioned before, with the stool, that maybe it's the wrong type of seat, but even, let's say the quiet corner, that sometimes it could be because of the materials that are in the corner, but sometimes it's the timing in which students will go. So are we sending students only when they're completely disorganized, dysregulated into that corner? Or are we giving them opportunities when they are regulated but need a break to go there, so they're in a better headspace to go and explore the different resources that are in that space? And it's only then when they are receptive that they can figure out what works and what doesn't work for them. Sometimes we will refer kids out of the class to another space when they're upset, and they only go out when they're upset, and then again they don't have the opportunity to be able to explore in a good headspace, and to feel successful. So I think that that's really, really important in terms of it's not a one size fits all. And when something doesn't work, to reflect a little bit about, maybe it's just the item itself and we're moving on to something else, but sometimes it's not the item itself, it's the way or the timing in which it's being used. So that to me is really important.
Students have bad days, just like we do.
Well, yeah.
And so just because it didn't work out, one day, doesn't mean that we don't try again another day, give them another opportunity.
Exactly. I mean, in terms of the misuse, sometimes the misuse could be because it really isn't the right fit, the type of item that we've selected for the student. But sometimes, to your point, Zarina, it's just a bad day, and no matter what type of item we give them in that moment, and none of it's going to be a right fit because they're just not in that right headspace. And so it is important to give many chances. But at the same time, for safety purposes, if the student uses an item and starts throwing it or breaking it or hurting people, with it, obviously there needs to be structures and boundaries and limits. And at that point, for safety purposes, we would be taking it away. But it doesn't mean that we are necessarily taking it away forever. Maybe we need to reiterate, why is it that we're using this tool? What's the purpose? What's the rules around it, and so forth? So kids, some need a couple times where we remind, and some need the reminder regularly. And so it's about knowing our students and their needs and challenges. In terms of the need to release or the need to stim, Zarina mentioned earlier in the presentation that even adults fidget, and that we fidget for a reason, because there is, either too much stress in the system or, and emotions over the top. And so it's our way of being able to release that stress. Now, of course, there are, some children or teens that tend to what we call stim. So they will have a behavior of some sort, whether it's rocking or flapping, or there's so many other examples of stimming. And some of them are more subtle than others. To me, it is the tool that we are giving to the student is not meant to contain the need to stim, because that need to stim is there for a reason. And so it's there to accompany them to let it out. And maybe in the now, it's not the time or place. And then we need to think about, for that particular student, have we built into the schedule of the day pockets of time and space where they can have opportunities to stim and release, and to give them the tools they need to let that out. And so I do understand that sometimes, we're trying to finish a lesson, and it's not the time for them to have that moment. But this is where the more that we think preventatively, and that student on a regular basis gets breaks and is able to have access to, opportunities to have these resources and let it out, that because they have other times to do it, it's going to be less critical in that moment of the lesson, because they'll have other opportunities. But if they don't get these opportunities, then it's going to kind of overflow, and it's going to come out left, right, and center, and it may affect the lesson time. And so thinking preventatively as well, not just thinking about I know the student is so dysregulated, now it's the time to give them the tool. No, now is not the time, especially for introducing something new. And the last point here was about consulting your OT. And you'll notice in some of the items that we present, some of them, they require to have training. We need to understand how to use them. Some of them can be dangerous in terms of safety. I remember years and years ago, in terms of the weighted vests, that those were taken away for safety purposes. And unfortunately, it was because there wasn't enough understanding and training that some of these items were misused, and then it could cause harm, and so forth. And so we really want to make sure that, some of the items that we're purchasing, that that there aren't elements that we're not aware of that we should be aware of. And if you don't have an OT in your school, I don't have access to an OT, there are other professionals that have some knowledge in terms of sensory needs and so forth. But above and beyond that, there are so many websites now. And we do refer, by the way, you'll notice in some of the links that we have in the resource guide, we refer to different OTs that have websites with recommendations and guidelines and so forth. And so that could be yet again another resource to have access to if you don't have access to an OT. In terms of making the difference between fulfilling a need and rewarding, how often I have come across situations where students are given those items only if they've behaved properly, and it is given as a reward. We really need to understand that the reason why we're using these tools is because there's a need, and we need to fulfill that need. So it's not about waiting until they get this organized or giving it only when they deserve it. And similarly to them going outside. To me, outside is not a privilege, it's a need. And so to be able to fulfill that need. And so too often we get confused about the purpose of a particular tool. Many tools are seen as toys, And it is harder then to focus on, are we using this to fulfill a need, or is this a privilege for as a reward? Tools support and answer a need, whether it's to help move, or a person to physically move, or to focus and concentrate, to calm, to recenter themselves, to shift gears and so forth. And so rewarding it with a toy is meant to be a pleasure without purpose. So I'm not saying that students shouldn't have Fun Friday, with different items for fun, but this is where we need to differentiate between a tool and a toy, and that those tools are not given as a reward, but rather part of a plan, a bigger plan with objectives for a specific purpose. All right, so we're finally getting into the tools, the different categories of the tools, now that we've kind of set the stage in terms of the parameters and the research and so forth. And so the first category that we're going to look at is flexible seating. I do tend to have observed more and more now that schools are investing monies into setting up flexible seating into the classrooms in the building, and so forth. And there really are benefits on so many levels, whether it is for being able to recenter yourself, that there's a need to move, that it helps for focus and concentration and so forth. And it just helps also for the comfort level, for the engagement level of the student. And so the four main categories, and you'll notice in the resource guide, we're really doing an overview on the handout, but you'll notice in the resource guide, there's much more detail. We walk through the different types of seating, the different types of workstations, and we describe specifically for that type of tool, what are the benefits. But the overall benefits for flexible seating would be for physical health. So we know that, in order to have movement, even if it's a little bit of movement, for example, you've got after the chair, you've got I forget the term now, the band, it's the band that you tie after the legs of the chair or the legs of the table. It's not a huge movement. We're just moving the feet. Do you remember the term, Zarina? Of that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You guys have it in your resource guide, but just moving the feet can be enough for there to have some degree of movement. It doesn't mean that we necessarily get up and that we do high intensity type of activity. It could be a very low energy recentering type of activity. It helps for comfort. I mean, I don't know for you guys, but for me to be sitting in a chair all day, my goodness, do I get uncomfortable, that my behind feels numb at times. And so to be able to get up or to have a seat that will allow for a different feel or a different, really helps in terms of comfort, in terms of sensory input. So, we have many of our students that are hyposensitive and that require sensory input in order to be more engaged, because their bodies are made in a such way that they're not registering the sensory in the same way than a neurotypical person or a hypersensitive person. And how important it is to offer options, because we know that not one size fits all. It's not one seat that works for everybody. And so there's so many different examples of flexible seating, from things that can be used at the desk to something that could be used if we're more standing, or to the floor, or some of them give opportunities for different movement, whether it's for rocking, or if you're on a yoga ball and you're just, doing a bit of bouncing or a little bit of movement left and right, that all of that can help in terms of feeding into different needs. Same thing with alternate workstations. Similarly to the flexible seating, I kind of see the two of them come together. And so the workstations, it's not that a student will be using this all day. I'm not saying that you should remove desks and chairs in the classroom. I'm saying that you can have some desks and chairs, but add to that other options, where if a student is doing group work or they're doing individual work, that they have opportunities. Maybe, you've got the picture here of the little girl who's on the floor, and she has the surf tray, or I don't remember what it's called, the surf desk. And so this allows for posture, but it also allows to stay on the floor and to have a working space where you can do some work, but you're on the floor. And how many times I've seen students that are perhaps standing or on the floor, And it doesn't mean that they're messing around and they're playing. They're actually quite focused and engaged on the activity at hand, but they require to have different positions, standing position or floor position in order to function throughout their days. And so again, offering a variety of these different options can help. Just subtle changes in positioning can help increase alertness, allowing students to stand, to stretch out, to move, increases oxygen flow to the brain and flow to the blood flow. You could offer things like clipboards if you don't have monies to invest in buying, because that's out of all the items, I would say the flexible seating and workstations are the most expensive because it's furniture. But we can use other things that we have in our classroom. I've seen teachers that are really creative and will use the window ledge as a standing station. And so that could be something that you can use. Clipboards that are not too expensive, you could get those at the dollar store, could be a way for a student to have a floor position and then working off of the clipboard. And that will make a huge difference. And so the workstations also help similarly to the flexible seating in terms of the physical health, given the movement, the engagement, and giving options. And so here are some examples of the workstations. And so having a standing desk or the window ledge, having a low table. And so sometimes some tables, the legs can be adjusted. So you could have you can adjust the legs to the minimum and then have a lower table. Having a lap tray or lap desk, a surf lap desk. So the first surf lap desk is this picture here that I showed you guys. Having clipboards or whiteboards, having cycle desks, or even having just the pedals. And so you could still be staying at your desk with a chair, but having the pedals, using an easel. That could be a way that we could work standing. And so these are different examples. I've even seen teachers that have brought in ironing boards as a standing desk, but you want to make sure that you use one that is sturdy and that it's not going to easily flip over. So that's in terms of the flexible seating and workstations. Now we're going to move into the sensory materials.
Yeah, so sensory materials, some students need like a sensory diet, if you will, and that helps address their sensory system needs at different times during the day. And there are different types of input that cause neurochemicals to be released. And we all receive stimulus from touch, sight, hearing, smell, taste. And then we need to process that sensory information. So this can be really challenging for some students, and it's not just those that are on the spectrum. Some students are hypersensitive, meaning that they're overreactive, and some are hyposensitive, meaning that they're underreactive. We offer a variety of sensory materials for sensory input, but also for engagement, and of course to provide options. And depending on the type, the duration, and the intensity, the benefits can last up to 2 hours. I'm going to talk about some examples. So for sound, soothing sounds can calm a student immediately. And music has amazing calming effects on our bodies. But they can listen to it with headphones. But also the reverse would be offering sound reducing tools, like noise canceling headphones or earplugs. And that assists the students, particularly when they're feeling overwhelmed with noise. Or they're trying to focus on a specific task. It's helpful. For visual stimulation, watching things move and change, it's very satisfying. And slow moving objects are very calming as well. And examples of that would be glitter jars, liquid timers, sand timers, even a slinky. And the reverse of that would be to offer a privacy folder or sunglasses to cut out too much visual stimulus.
I would even add, Zarina, like sometimes we don't think about this, but the lighting in the class, the neons,
yes.
and so to be able to have, some sort of cover that helps to dim a little bit the lights, that can be huge too.
Or using a lamp instead of the classroom lights, I've seen as well. for scents, we have scented markers. They have those little scratchy sniff stickers.
Yeah.
And the reverse of that would be opening the door or opening the windows to reduce overwhelming odors in the classroom, because some students can be really sensitive to that. For tactile, surfaces like textures please the students when they play with them, when they touch them. It provides a calming satisfaction. And examples of that could be the mermaid pillow, or a textured bin with kinetic sand or rice, beans, lentils, or Orbeez is very popular as well. I have made textured frames, different materials that are soft, prickly, rough. A bubble wrap is another good one. You smash the bubble wrap. And soft things too, of course, soft pillows or tutus, Play-Doh, slime, all kinds of things. There's also breathing too. Focused breathing brings in the oxygen we need for improved concentration and better memory and focus. What else? There's also visual cards for breathing with tips. There's the blowers, like the pinwheels also, which are good for breathing.
Yeah.
There's also the use of the popular weighted animals, and they provide deep pressure touch as well. And there's brushing with those little medical brushes. And then there'd be oral motor stimulation for example, like a chewy. They have them on the necklaces, or a pencil topper,
right?
Or they even have like those bracelets now. And there's some students, or a lot of students, I should say, that benefit from the use of these tools to help them fulfill the oral stimulation need, and others use them to help them concentrate during a task, or to manage stress. But of course, as Catherine mentioned before, we have to consult, make sure that we should be offering a chewy to a particular student. Usually we have to get permission from OT and the parents. And when we give our students opportunities to use these tools, it limits other sensory seeking behavior. Do you want to add something, Catherine?
No, I was just going to say, I went to visit a nurturing support center last week, and usually when I think about the breathing kind of aids that are there, I often see the star, but I got to see that she had these bunch of different ones that were kind of like using your finger in a maze, and there were stops along the way, and you would use them for the breathing, and it was the coolest thing ever. I don't know where she got them from, but I could probably find them on the internet and print them. But there's so many different ones. Some of them are like spirals, and they're different shapes and forms, and it's yeah. So I really thought they were neat. So here are examples of some of the classroom favorites.
Yeah, so there's, of course, as we mentioned, the kinetic sand, the scented Play-Doh, the water beads, Theraputty, the weighted lap pad, water timers, pin art. There's a lot.
And I wanted to say, because again, thinking about funds, and do we have access to monies to be able to purchase these things? Some of them can actually be homemade, like Play-Doh can be homemade. I've seen where we've taken, going back to the visuals, the search and find bottle. So you could take a plastic bottle and fill it up with different items that you find, asked for, for parents to donate, or from the community to donate. I mean, there's different ways that we can go about having access to tools without necessarily purchasing a lot of them, because I do understand that it can be costly after some point.
Yeah, and you can make your own glitter bottles as well.
Right.
Yeah. So sensory break area ideas. Here is some examples of some ideas.
Yeah, you've named quite a bit of those. Yeah.
Sensory bins are super popular. And so you fill up a bin with rice or corn, quinoa, whatever. And then you could put small objects within that, and then the students would have to go and find it, such as like little marbles or those little stretchy animals. The students love to do that. Also creating a wall, I've done that in the past, or like a table with pieces of textured materials that are put inside picture frames, and the students just go and they touch and feel.
Yeah, it's really great.
So having like it doesn't have to be like a whole area, but having, it could be on a little trolley if you don't have a lot of space, or just having a little corner with those items can be really beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into the fidgets. So these tools can provide a calming effect for a student who is feeling dysregulated, such as agitated or anxious. And the right fidget used as a tool is an outlet for unconscious behavior. So they support our students in their learning by having a structured way to fidget. So these devices, they can also encourage movement and sensory input, which are important in the children's development. And a fidget tool is not necessarily engaging a person's senses like a sensory tool does, but it's fulfilling a need to fidget. So, but at the same time, while staying focused. And if we look at the picture here, and we read all the benefits of this really popular popper fidget, we see that, you know, it's a popular toy, but it's also a tool. So I'm not going to read them all, but you have wrist stability, finger isolation, eye-hand coordination, and so much more.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to really look at these fidgets not as toys, but more as tools. What can we get out of them? How can we use them?
Exactly. And some of them are not appropriate for the classroom. I mean, the fact that fidgets, you know, the spinners that we had way back when that caused that, you know, a lot of issues, those haven't been reintroduced back into the, at least not in the classroom. You know, if there's sound that comes out of them, light that comes out of them, that, you know, and so forth. I mean, obviously, and it distracts this, then it's not an appropriate item for a school setting or a classroom setting. Although one item that might make a bit of noise might be not appropriate for the classroom, but it might be okay to have it in an alternate space somewhere in the building where there isn't a, you know, a lesson going on and that we're using it for a different purpose.
And when we say not be distracting, it's not just distracting to that particular student that's using it. Is it distracting to the teacher?
Right.
Is it distracting to the other students? So we have to think of all of that as well. And here we have some classroom favorites. We try to have, like Catherine was saying, quiet fidget tools, discrete ones that don't distract. Squeezable ones are good. They release stress, and they can calm a student. And the popular example is, you know, all those various types of stress balls, putty, pool noodle when they're like in small little slices, and even little small objects that fit in the hand. You have stretchy things. So there's something very soothing about pulling on something and watching it return. The students absolutely love that, as long as they're not, again, using them inappropriately and then they become, you know, a slingshot of some sort. But there's also like a rubber ball, stretchy bands, little gummy worms. The stretchy man too is a popular one. There's different types of manipulatives. And so there's fidget cubes, as long as they're quiet. There's the Rubik's Cube, little fidget balls, infinity cube, the tangle, which we've seen a lot of in classrooms, the fidget snake, the chained fidget. What else is there? There's the marble maze, which is a nice quiet one. And these are all really good options, again, as long as they're used properly. And remember, there's always that trial period.
Yeah.
So if something isn't working or the student isn't able to use it respectfully, then we try something else.
Yeah.
You know, as we said many times today, it's really not one size fits all. And we have to keep that in mind. And
Mm-hmm.
that different students are going to respond to different tools differently.
Exactly. Some, benefit more from the squeeze, other benefit more from the stretch. And so it's really trial and error. Yeah.
So if we mention some of the
Oh, sorry.
sorry,
I'll
some of
go.
the benefits of fidget tools, it's an outlet for unchanneled energy. It improves focus. The repetitive movement is familiar. It's also very calming. It improves their readiness to participate and to learn. And some elements to consider when using fidget tools is, of course, what is this device made of? Is it durable? Is it expensive, as
Right.
Catherine said? And what is the size of it? What is the weight of this tool? Is it quiet? Is it loud? And is it regulating, or is it really just distracting?
Mm-hmm. All right. So now a different category of tools, looking at fine motor activities. And so the process of touching and creating something with your hands is very calming and gratifying experience. Students benefit from manipulating different materials and textures. And so some you'll notice that some of these items may fit into more than one category. So we're looking at it by category. But some of the more kind of popular examples of fine motor activities could be creating the rainbow looms or the bead pets or the making bracelets or the worry dolls or origami, stringing Cheerios or beads or whatnot. Anything that has to do even with taking a, how do you call it there? To be able to grab things with it and to bring it from one side to the next. So the tongs, I was looking for the word that using tongs can be another activity that can be in terms of fine motor, and this helps not only in terms of the fine developing the fine motor itself, but even in terms of focus, in terms of concentration, in terms of calming, recentering, and so forth. And so there's so many different attributes in terms of the fine motor. Fine motor can be used in the classroom. So let's say, when we think about brain breaks, oftentimes we think of brain breaks doing high level energy activities. We put a song on and people will dance to it. Fine motor activities can be a brain break as well, where we're doing more of a recentering low level energy activity. It could be that a student has a project, a fine motor project in their bin, and that they're ongoingly working on that project from, let's say they go to the nurturing support center or they're done their work, and rather than getting distracted and distracting others, that they can move on to doing that task, and that can keep them recentered. Any other thoughts around fine motor activities, Zarina, before I move on to the next?
No, I think you covered it.
Perfect. Thinking about pencil paper games and activity pages. So examples like coloring, mandalas, doodling, sketching, sorry, color by numbers, the paper cutting activities, dot to dot, mazes, I Spy, find the differences, crossword puzzles, having an oversized paper and having that as a mural. And I'm sure there's more and more other ones that I haven't thought of. Again, these can allow for recentering ourselves in terms of calming ourselves, emotion regulation, can help with fine motor, can help with concentration. Doodling, there is a lot of literature out there on doodling and the benefits of doodling. I know many teachers at the high school put a stop to doodling, and it actually has been shown that doodling can help you to concentrate better, to develop a creative insight. It helps to process emotions, alleviate stress. It is a creative outlet. It can help you learn better, and it helps you have big picture thinking, and more. There's more benefits to doodling. And so for those that think of this as distracting and that the kids are not listening when they're doodling, for many kids, it's actually quite the opposite. It helps them to listen better. Some of them they're kinesthetic learners, and so they learn better in movement. A whole other category altogether. And this, I would see this happening perhaps more in alternate spaces in the school, or maybe during a brain break time, building activities. And so having an area in the school where we offer different types of building games. This offers movement, creativity, physical work as you're building, taking things apart and back again. There's even a problem solving portion to that. It can simulate thinking about real life when things work or don't work, getting frustrated because it's not working and trying to figure out how to make it work, or to face your frustration. So you're working through your frustration. And so some examples of building could be that you're doing Lego pegboard or marble mazes. You could do that with popsicle sticks. We could have foam tunnels, popsicle stick tower constructions, using blocks. My colleague Martine Demers, for those who know her, that was working with me before, she loved doing woodworking projects. And so being able to build things with wood, you could even use cardboard boxes where you could create towers with cardboard boxes and then destroy them afterwards. And so there's a portion where you're focused, and then there's a portion where you're able to release. And so that's huge in terms of the building. The creating portion. And by the way, on the Center of Excellence website, we have a page dedicated to building and creating activities. We have a whole guide, resource guide, with tons and tons of ideas on different activities that you can use. And so in terms of the creative outlets, having materials ready and available for students who gravitate towards creative expressions. These outlets offer students another avenue for expressing their emotions. Yarn creations, knitting, corking, can be huge. Drawing, painting, journaling, writing poems or songs, scrapbooking, sketching, photography. And so all of that will fit into the creative outlets. Another category that fits to that. And I do recommend for this to happen, not just in alternate spaces in the building, but also in the classroom, having moments where we can talk about emotional release. I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Hannah Beach and her handbook, and I talked about the frustration monster. And so that is one example. Here are other examples. So I do have here the link to be able to have access to her handbook. She has other editorials on her website. So yes, she talks about the frustration monster, but she also talks about drumming and drawing the music. And so through the movement of the music, thinking about, for example, classical music, where there's sections in the song that's really, really intense. And then there's other sections in the song where it's more, the melody is different. And so to be able to help students experience their bodies through movement and going from high intensity to low intensity helps for them to build their capacity for emotion regulation. And so I invite you to go and take a look at that. Here are other examples, Zarina, in terms of high energy release.
There's also tools for high energy release. And because some students, they might require these tools to release high energy levels. And these are our students that need that short break because they need to get out that built up energy in a big way. And so these are some options. You have those big exercise balls that they can hit. Also the pool noodles, they like to slam them on the floor. Shooting Velcro darts on a target, jumping with the skip rope, smashing the bubble wrap on the floor with their feet. Of course, like in the image, jumping on a mini trampoline. So it can be rough or explosive, but again, it's important to know that these type of activities tend to happen not in the classroom, and they tend to happen with a technician or attendant in the gym or in the nurturing support center.
Yeah.
Or your oasis. And people passing by might say, oh wow, he's having a blast, he's just playing, but it's really not just that. We're using these specific tools or activities to make sure that our students are ready and available to learn.
Yeah, I kind of see it twofold, where on the one hand, we're if there's already a lot of stress in the body, it's to be able to let out some of that stress so they're available to learn. But also as they're trying out these different activities, for them to build self-awareness of their bodies and the need to be able to release and so forth. And so as they're trying these different activities, they get to figure out, what is it that works and doesn't work for them. As somebody mentioned in the chat about punching bags, I just wanted to kind of nuance a little bit in terms of the punching bag, because I see that separate from these other different items that we've named. The thing about the punching bag is that we might be reinforcing the neural pathway that in order to release frustration that we're punching. And so I would suggest to have something that has a similar movement that is not necessarily a punch. And so if you're throwing a target against a board, against the target, do you have a similar movement to the punch where you're throwing something and it allows for the release, but you are reworking the neural pathways in other fashions to let out that frustration. Same thing if you've got balls, you're throwing a ball against the wall, or you're throwing balls into a basket, or that would be a different movement. And so I would recommend to stay away from actual punching. I think that there's other ways that we can have the same impact without it being punching something. All right.
Many games can also be used as tools because they have several benefits. So for example, we have playing cards. They promote socialization, they reduce stress, it improves memory, and it enhances motor skills. We also have board games, and they promote social skills. When you're playing a board game, they boost self-esteem. They develop fine motor skills and hand and eye coordination. And some of them teach numbers, colors, shapes, word recognition. And also when we're playing these games, it helps our students switch gears. And another great one is puzzles. So they intrigue students to gravitate towards them. And again, they're switching gears as they look for those pieces. And having a puzzle table in the classroom is a great community addition. And it lets the students actually create a bigger puzzle over a longer period of time. They don't have to finish it in one sitting because they can go back to that puzzle table. Also, outdoor games is super important. They promote curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking, and they improve motor development.
Yeah,
Outdoor
just the
games,
fresh air too, right? Being outdoors, having more space to move.
Outdoor games, they stimulate all the five senses, and children play harder outdoors than they do indoors, which is why they need those daily opportunities to do so. And you can set up like simple outdoor games like scavenger hunts, nature walks, math with chalk, and then you're using your outdoor play as a tool.
Yeah, you think you've named pretty much all of the I guess teamwork would be the other one, right? That could be part of that as well. I would also say, going back to the games, whether it's card games or board games, for students to experience losing, I think that in itself is huge. Parents have a harder time more and more, I feel, to have their kids face losing, for example, or being faced with the limit. And so I think that to create those opportunities where they get to experience time and time again, because adaptation, which is the process of accepting the fact that you're not always going to win, that you're not always going to be the best at everything, that process is called adaptation, and that requires for us to get through that many, many, many times. It's not just a one time where we grow from that. And so for us to have these pockets of time and space in the school setting where we create those opportunities for them to face that loss, I think is a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, super important.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't forget about imaginative play. So whether it's dress up, drama, or improvisation for older students, creating masks, role playing with puppets, it all benefits our students. because this type of play is a tool, and it's used to practice and further develop language skills, problem solving, and self-regulation, of course. And it also helps older students with public speaking and coming out of their shell. And it provides all the children with a moment to express various feelings, without repercussions. And it's a venue to express one's emotions in a less vulnerable way. And also within the context of like role of a character. And it allows you to express with intensity and without being constrained from like socially appropriate.
Yeah.
It's not socially appropriate to act a certain way, but when I'm in the role of a character, I can be loud, I can roar like a lion, or I can be bad, I could hurt somebody.
And this is for all ages. I mean, sometimes we think about imaginative play for the young ones, right? But even for adults, there's been some research that has shown including drama program in prisons, that inmates actually have demonstrated more empathy and improvement on so many fronts because they were able to experience emotions in through a character. So because they're so defended and that they're not experiencing it for themselves, for their life. But remember I said earlier in the presentation that it's the same neural pathways in the play mode and in the stress mode. And so when you're doing it in the play mode, your brain doesn't know the difference that it is happening for play or for real. And so they really, really saw a difference with those inmates that had access to those drama programs. Oh, I forgot another category.
Yes,
Sorry.
the sentimental item. So what is a sentimental item? Like it could be referred to as a comfort object, a transitional item, or even an attachment object. And yes, we always say, no toys from home, especially no stuffed animals, nothing. But when we look at the research, we see that they have positive effects on children by reducing their anxiety, because they provide psychological comfort during difficult times. So in times of separation, just like going to bed, or especially going to school, like for our K4s and our K5s, that's really hard. And often this item is a blanket or a stuffed toy, but it could also be like a little note from mom,
Picture,
or a family photo. And sometimes they even have like a special nickname. Therefore, like these sentimental items, they're also used as a tool because they're supporting our students. They're giving them comfort, and they're helping them gain independence. And also it helps them self-soothe when away from mom, especially.
All right, we're almost winding down to the end of the presentation. The when and the where to use these tools, because we talked a lot about the classroom, but there are different times and spaces in which those can be used more than in other times and spaces. And so in terms of times, I talked a lot about brain breaks. And so, whether it's within the classroom or elsewhere, but when the student needs to have respite, whether it's in the corner, the designated area in the classroom, or it's a brain break, that is huge. In terms of the spaces, so the classroom, yes, but also if you have an oasis or nurturing support center, even, one thing I don't see enough of, and some schools really do this wonderfully, is in terms of the hallways. Having movement stations, kinesthetic pathways, and so forth. Those can be huge in terms of offering support. And it could be a tool in itself, but it could also be built into the building where it's something off the wall or off the floor or whatnot. And so all of those can be used similarly to tools. And so these are just a couple pictures of, on the floor or having a corner or on the wall. Lighting can make a difference in that way and so forth. And so as we're getting to a close, because I'm conscious there's only a couple minutes left, we won't be able to answer these questions, but we wanted to have you finish off just with a couple questions to reflect on. And so first of all, things to kind of ask yourself, should all students be given access to these tools, or only those who really seem to need those tools? How do we present, above and beyond that, how do we present the use of those tools to parents? And so that is something to reflect upon, individually within your classrooms, but also as a school team. Another thing to reflect upon is what to do when a student misuses or refuses to use a tool, but we know that they would really benefit from it. And so how do we get around that? And the last one is, how do we evaluate the use of that tool, whether it's a good fit? Is it actually bringing a benefit or not, or what? And so these are just some reflection questions. There could be so many more other questions that we could be looking at. There are, by the way, a couple editorials off of my website, both in the flexible seating area, where there are like the major roadblocks to putting these in place to be able to build the buy-in to that, whether it's about money or it's about not having all the staff that are on board, or that it's an issue in terms of space, that you have a small classroom, you don't have the space, and so forth. And so these are just different reflection questions to leave you off on. And so I can leave a couple minutes if ever there's people who wanted to stay back and walk through, but I understand it's 3 o'clock, and so that's the end of the presentation. I'll stop sharing and I will stop the recording.